Hello and good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Leaders Dojo. And I'm very glad that you are here together with me and my very, very special guest tonight, Miss Aysha Shujaat. Um, okay, I better not introduce her now because I have this habit of getting ahead of myself. So let me just go through my opening spiel. And if you're here, tune in already, just drop us a hello in the comments wherever you are. Let us know where you're coming from, right? Are you coming from within Malaysia, outside Malaysia? Are you watching us from YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook? Do let us know and drop us a note to say hi. Hi, Mubina. Mubina from, wait, are you from Pakistan as well? Gosh, I'm so sorry, I can't remember. No, you're not. You're not from Pakistan. You're from Bangladesh, Mubina, right? Did I get you right? Okay. Hi, Vimala. Thank you for joining. Right, just let me introduce myself a little bit. For those of you who are still not familiar with who I am Chee-Seng, as you know, the host of the Leaders Dojo, and I am a. Oh, Mubina, you're in Pakistan. Oh, wow, great. So, I'm a writer and I'm also a content trainer and thought leadership coach. I've been a writer for over 25 years, and lately I've been moving towards training as well in the past year or so. And that's where I joined up with a few of my friends uh, to form the Communications Leadership Academy, right? So, the unique thing about this company is where we take a very integrated approach to communications, leadership, and branding. You know, all of us have our different specialties. Some of us are in the organizational development side, some of us are in digital, some of us are on strategic communications. I am coming from the content strategy point of view. But all of us come together and we form this synergy because we all have this understanding that all this is tied together by purpose, right? It has to be authentic, it has to be purposeful, and authenticity and purpose comes from culture, and culture is driven by leadership. So that's where the synergy happens, and that's where we want to see that synergy happening out in the world today through our training programs. And that's one of the reasons why I started the Leaders Dojo, because I have a concern, about leadership. um, the intention here is to spark the conversations about leadership, communications, and branding, and how they are so essentially integrated today, in terms of how we function in the world, how companies can thrive and sustain in the world. So twice a month, every second and fourth Tuesday, I have a chat with experts, leaders, change makers, to get their insights into these topics. So I don't want this to be an interview where it's only me and the guest talking. So let's all join the conversation. I invite all of you to participate with your comments and questions. Don't be shy about it, and we will answer your questions and we will respond to your comments, right? Because it's all about learning together. So tonight, I am very honored to have with me Miss Aysha Shujaat. Aysha is an electoral management expert who works to strengthen democratic processes and to enhance inclusion in developing democracies. And she has led missions for the UN, international NGOs, and national institutions, including in post-conflict elections in places like Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, and others. Aysha is passionate about empowering women and girls and heads Project Girls for Girls in Pakistan, a non-profit focused on closing the gender leadership gap. And I first met Aysha when we were doing our NLP certification together, and I tell you, she is a very strong, powerful woman, very petite, but not somebody you want to mess with, right? Definitely very strong. I'm probably twice her size, and oh, the moment she walks in the room, you just have to respect her, right? So, without further ado, let me bring on Aysha, and let's say hi to Aysha together. Hi, Aysha.
Hi, Chee-Seng. How are you?
Thank, thank you for joining us tonight. Let me just say hi to a few more people. Shenba, and Benedict. Hi, thank you for joining us. Right, Aisha. So, thank you for joining me tonight on my show. And I know we had this a short conversation earlier, and we were talking about leadership, right, and purposeful leadership, and sometimes it takes a lot of courage. So I think I would like to discuss more about that in this show. uh, and I think a lot of our viewers as well would, I think, have a great interest in terms of what it takes to be a leader with purpose, right? And especially the kind of courage and the kind of characteristics you need to have. But before we go into all that, maybe Aisha, you can tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Chee-Seng. I'm always watching your show in awe, and it's really, really an honor to be here and talking to you and your audience today. So, a little bit about myself. As you mentioned, I'm a democracy, governance, and elections professional. I started 2 decades ago, actually, in the wake of 9/11. And I mentioned that because this is such an important moment right now to mention that with everything that's happening in Afghanistan. And what happened in Afghanistan 2 decades ago is really what gave a jump start to my career. I was an intern at that time, and 9/11 had happened, and my boss flew the country that very night. And I came back to the morning without knowing what to do, not having a boss, having an internship, wondering what was I going to do, where was my career going to go. This was going to be my fantastic internship opportunity. Is it going to end? And all of that uncertainty and the VUCA reality that we now talk about, I feel like my career started with that.
Wait,
Is there
you were interning in the US at the time?
I was interning in Pakistan with the United Nations World Food
I
Program at
see.
that time.
All right.
and
Okay.
and and we are neighbors, so it's and we were the sort of hub for a lot of development aid that went into Afghanistan at that point, and a lot of people were gathering in Pakistan to start the re-entry of UN into Afghanistan. So
Mm,
my alignment with purpose driven leadership started right at the very beginning of my career, and that's why I'm telling the story of the start of my career, because it holds great significance.
mm,
And from there on, it has been a very interesting 2 decades. A few years of what followed that internship was working on humanitarian assistance. I was in Afghanistan working on the re-entry of UN, and coordination of some logistical efforts between different UN agencies. And then as a few years of after a few years of doing that and sort of experiencing the devastation of war, um, I got a bit disillusioned with the whole humanitarian assistance. Not to say that it's not important, it's extremely significant. But the solution has to be more than just providing assistance, right? And at that
mm.
point, an opportunity came up to work on the first presidential election that was happening in 2004. And I thought, this is interesting.
That was in
So
Afghanistan.
this was, yeah, I was still in Pakistan at that time. I've been in and out of Afghanistan many times up until this
Okay.
point. But this
But the
opportunity,
election was for the first
uh, yes.
President Azai at the time, right?
Yes. And in the election world, when you're doing elections as a part of the peace building process, you also include the large population of diasporas that have moved out of the country. So you want to
Mm,
include those diaspora population as a part of the tool, peace building tool, and also to encourage them to return. So thus the start of my election career started in Pakistan when I was organizing the out of country voting for Afghan refugees living in Pakistan. And that's how I sort of thought, this is interesting. This is sort of rebuilding the country. It's a part of the peace building process. And of course, working with refugees means you're working with a really marginalized community in the host countries. You know about all the refugee issues in Malaysia as well. So it was very, very impact driven and purpose and passion driven.
mm.
Um, and that carried on for a good decade. I can see you have a burning question.
Yes. I'm
Yeah.
trying to do the math in my head. At that time, you were like what, mid 20s?
Yes, I was.
Oh
I
my
was
goodness.
actually.
And you're already on international missions.
I was. I think my first was at the age of 22. And by the time I was
Wow.
leading elections, I was 23, and then 24 when I was doing sort of really large scale national missions as sort of leading the operations at a very sort of large level. So yeah, I started young and I went up the ladder young, and I strongly believe that that was because of my commitment to the purpose and the passion, of course along with competency, right? But I
Right.
think when you're working on a project like that, your passion, your sense of purpose really drives you, and that
Yeah.
enhances your skill and your drive to be more competent in doing what you're doing. So my relationship with purpose driven leadership has been literally from the get-go. When I didn't even, as I said, when I didn't even see myself as a leader when I was an intern. And I remember having this very interesting conversation with someone. We were sitting in Amman at that time. I was working on the humanitarian mission for Iraq. And somebody said, if there was a bomb blast, because we work in this very
Mm.
conflicted, you know, realities post-war, um, who would be the leader? And I was just 23 at that time, right? And I was like,
Mm.
I would get up and lead. And it was very interesting that all of us around the table were very committed to getting up and leading in that particular situation. And I think it comes from a sense of purpose, because we were
Mm.
all putting our life at risk for a very bigger cause that we all truly wanted to make a difference in. So yeah, it's very interesting to sort of realize how your success is deeply tied with purpose.
Yeah, and that brings me to my next question. At 23, you're sitting at a coffee shop with, possibility of bombs going on off around you, and you're jumping up and saying, if that happens, I'm ready to, lead the way.
Yeah.
Okay, let me just throw a question out there. When you were 23, did you have to face a situation like this? I know when I was 23, I was just trying to figure out what was I going to do with my life. I was just I think I was just graduating, and I was still wondering what to do with my life. And I think that's just so amazing. But coming back to your question, then, right, when you realize that, okay, it's time for me to step up, how did you come to that realization? Because I think I've heard a lot of young people, they have this question, what's my purpose, what's my passion, how do I know what to do with my life? How did
Hmm.
you know at such a young age, and to be prepared to carry that burden in that kind of situation?
Hmm. Thank you for that question, Chee-Seng. I want to differentiate the desire or the passion to lead with the purpose behind leadership. Because what I had at the age of 23 was the passion to lead or the passion to do the right thing. And that's when
Mm.
somebody would ask you, sitting in a coffee shop with the possibility of your life under threat, what would you do? You naturally answer, you lead, because you have a passion for leadership, or you believe that you have that skill or the competency. But that does not necessarily mean that that is the purpose. And I always say
Mm.
leadership is not the end goal. Leadership is only a tool to create the change you want to see in the world. um,
Mm.
so I actually loved what I was doing with a great sense of purpose, because it was always very related to the development of the people that I saw were deeply affected by the devastation of war. But then at the same time, my life purpose did not come to me in those years. That was my passion
Mm.
for doing the right thing driving me. My life
Right.
purpose actually awoke at a very turmoil time of my life, which happened when I took a career break. So for over a good decade after of working on all these exciting projects that I'm talking about, and jumping up the leadership ladder very quickly, um, and having a very strong identity to what I do as a professional.
Mm.
um, I had a life change. I got married, and then I became a mother. And it is when I became a mother that I realized what systemic exclusion means.
Mm.
And I recognized what it means to not have a choice, or to be perceiving as to not having a choice, right? And it is at that time when I started to face some systemic barriers as well.
Right.
And that's when I had a awakening of a new purpose in life, which was to have more women, girls, minorities included in the system. And so I tell people, when the youngsters would ask me, how do you find your passion and purpose? I say, keep doing what you're doing with a sense of passion and a sense of commitment to do the right thing. And
Mm.
purpose will come to you. It will come through the experiences of life. It will come through the exchanges that you're having. It is not something that necessarily is, sort of born with. And then there's a process, and we can talk about that later, but I'm just speaking a bit too much, so I'd like to stop and maybe give
No, I
you
think it's
a chance to
fantastic
answer more.
because I think what you're saying is fantastic because I feel for these people because they're looking for something that's meaningful in their life, purposeful, and they want to contribute. But I think what you say is really practical and real because it's not about finding a sense of purpose and then you have the passion to do it, right? It's what you're saying is if I'm hearing you right, that you have a sense of personal values
Yeah,
which you are living out in your life, and well, you will find your way to your purpose eventually, right? Or it
absolutely.
will be revealed to you eventually.
Absolutely. That's
So
exactly what I'm saying.
that's amazing. That's great. Oh,
Hi, Sangeeta.
wow.
I
I,
see
I think I
Sangeeta.
think we can forget about all the other questions and just talk about this.
Absolutely. We could
No,
definitely.
but we have a set of questions that we need to go through. Okay,
Okay.
so uh, well, I think you've answered this question already. That's done.
Come
Okay,
up with a
tell us
new
about
one.
some of the social work that you're doing. That you're driving, that you're leading now.
Sure. So there are a couple of things that I'm doing. One is, as I mentioned, my work in democracy governance, where I'm working on more inclusive democratic processes. Again, over the years that I worked on elections, I was yet again disillusioned from the fact that elections is not the answer. It is only a tool.
Mm,
Because you and I have all been to cast our ballots, and we all have our issues with the system, and really that is just a tool. So, as I realized more and more that for democracy to truly function with its spirit, it needs to be inclusive, and it needs to have all voices of minorities and marginalized communities heard and included. So, what I'm doing is working on building participatory electoral processes. I'm working on enhancing women's, minorities, women with disabilities, their participation in the election process, currently here in
right.
Pakistan, but hopefully going regional on this as well. And on the side, this purpose that I talked about, which sort of was awakened during the time when I was on a career break, and realizing that we women, and there is a great friend of mine, Sangeeta Mathu, in the audience, who has been, by the way, my soul sister, and really a great passion, somebody you should invite on your show. We talked about, no matter how much passion we have, and I think this is what your younger audience would relate to, no matter how much passion you bring and how much work you put into, when systemic barriers are in your way, then you're lost, right? And you don't know where to
Mm,
go. And that was a very frustrating moment for me, because after doing all that fantastic work that I went and did in my 20s, my 30s were a blur moment without recognizing where my life was headed towards, because I was in a constant conflict between maternal responsibilities, personal and professional ambitions, and that's what I do now. I mentor young girls to find their voices and to find their places, and to help people understand who they are and what they want. Because if it wasn't for friends like Sangeeta or platforms for Lean in Malaysia that I met when I was in Malaysia, I wouldn't have
yep.
recognized what it means to go through the difficult moments in life, and what it means to have a mentor or to have a tribe. And to lead with purpose with a tribe is something
Mm,
else, because one of the, I think for me, the key ingredients of purpose driven leadership is also to have a sense of tribe, and a tribe that you belong
mm,
to. And that's a tribe that I'm working towards building for women in Pakistan since I've been back here in 2018.
Right. So maybe you can share a little bit more about building a tribe, especially where how does purpose fit into that? Because to a marketing person like me, building a tribe means something a little bit different. It
Mm.
basically means building a market for ourselves, right? But
Mm-hmm.
in terms of where leadership is concerned, and where social change is concerned, I mean, how would you square that?
So it means of people who believe in the same values or that are working
Mm,
towards the same change that you want to see. So when I joined Lean in Malaysia, we were a fantastic group of around 50 uh, women and some men who truly believed in gender equality, who truly
mm,
wanted to close the gender gap. Each of us had our own personal stories about facing some sort of a barrier, systemic or social or personal. Um, and we all recognize that this is something that needed to change. So you build your tribe not just within the team culture. Of course, within an organization, I believe that having a sense of tribe also matters, and that's a
mm,
slightly different ingredient, and we can go there if you want. But in the context of social change, you build your tribe with like-minded people with the rights, the
mm,
sort of same set of values, same set of whatever change you want to see in the world.
mm. That's great. Um, but in terms of how do I want to put this fairly so that it doesn't sound like I'm questioning you.
Of course,
Um, how
question me.
how, how do you, like, if you're talking about social change, you want to impact the wider community, right? But will there be a would there be a conflict if we're building a tribe of similarly thinking kind of people? It's a smaller group, right? So how do we extend that tribe, right, to have a wider social impact?
I think that's a great question and a very interesting dilemma. Now, I don't see it as a conflict because you see, what you're working on a larger social change. For example, for myself, I'm working on gender and inclusion. Um, and for me to have that smaller tribe that stands behind me when I am down, when I need to be lifted up, is not a conflict, it's an accelerator.
Mm,
Anyone who is working on social change would recognize it is exhausting. It fatigues you at a point because you're moving against the tide. You're sort of pushing the wall, you're pushing the boundaries, and that is not an easy job. And that's not a job for everyone either. As you and I were talking
mm,
before the show, it takes a lot of courage to keep
yeah,
pushing against the tide and to challenge status quo, which is what is imperative for you to do if you want to create social change, right? Um,
yeah,
to be able to do that, you need that smaller set of people around you who stand by you whenever the rough gets rougher.
mm,
So I don't see it as a conflict. I see it as a catalyst that makes you more effective as a leader. And if we talk about it in the corporate context, everybody say, it's a common saying, right? Leadership is a lonely journey. It doesn't have to be
mm,
lonely. I mean, why do we make it lonely by this sense of competition all the time? If we create a sense of collaboration, if we realize the common purposes that we are working towards, it doesn't have to be a lonely journey. And I think it makes you a much more effective leader when you have smart, sane voices around you to help you navigate through that journey of leadership.
well, and I think what you say is so important because that statement, leadership is loneliness, that has been said to me before,
Yeah,
right? Because somebody has said to me before, somebody called me a person who sees things, right? I'm a visionary, right? And visionaries are normally alone because you see it before everybody else.
yeah,
And if you are going to walk that way, and you're right, it takes a lot of strength and courage to walk alone before everyone else, right? Because the risk of failure is very high, and
yeah,
public failure, especially if you're leading, right?
absolutely.
So to have that tribe, well, I'm gonna need to reconfigure my thinking now. Where are we gonna find a tribe of like-minded leaders who can support each other, especially in a business context, right? Because like it or not, your competitors in the business world, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think it takes a lot of courage and ability to sort of connect beyond individual interests to build a tribe. I am reminded of the my experience in Malaysia when I was the president for Lean in Malaysia. I worked a lot with HR departments or HR heads as we were designing some mentorship programs for women, and I'm still friends with them. And many a times my Facebook pops up with them getting together as the HR tribe, and
Hmm.
you have the gurus of the gurus, whether it's the Citibank or whether it's your, I don't want to take all the names, I think that's not be nice, but I see all of those HR leaders working in different companies but calling it together and coming together in common interest of the improvement of HR practices in Malaysia. So
Right.
I think that it this is a traditional thing of the past where we have to sort of let go, and come together in the common interest of that purpose. And I think once you do that, then it's sort of very natural that it'll come to you. One part of your question was, where do you find tribe? I think finding platforms which are aligned with what you want to do in life at that point. So when I connected with Lean in Malaysia, which is where I found my tribe, my first tribe. I'm now building tribes wherever I go. But my first tribe, and it wasn't to find a tribe. I
Hmm.
joined Lean in Malaysia because I was on a career break and I wanted to break out of that career break and try something in Malaysia and see what my professional prospects were.
Hmm.
So the purpose was very different, right? But it was a
Right.
platform that was supporting women. I joined their first career program, which was focused on accelerating women's leadership. And I was the only person who was out of a job, if I remember correctly, and I was on a career break. So
Hmm.
I had a huge dilemma. Was I doing the right thing? Will I actually find people who are like me? Will people understand me? Because I'm on a career break. I was much older than most of the group as well. But you join with whatever your purpose at that point in life is. And then, things keep building, and
And
doors keep
yeah,
opening.
and I remember you became a mentor in that group, right? So
I
you
became the
can't.
president for Lead in
Oh yeah,
Malaysia.
president. Oh my gosh, sorry, not
Yeah.
mentor. My gosh, you can't keep good leaders down, man.
Oh,
Career
it was an
break
opportunity,
too.
and yeah, yeah, yeah. No, career break is a whole topic on its own, and happy to talk about that at some point as well. But I think that career break is, as I said, my feminine awakening as well as my purpose of life came to me during that period and navigating through that period. So yeah,
And
absolutely.
and isn't it
I,
and isn't it amazing when a lot of people are wondering what to do with their life and what's their purpose in life, and you actually found it during a time when it actually felt like you had actually taken a break from what you felt was purposeful for doing, right? And I think it's really
yeah,
great, how life works out. Okay, let's
and you
take
had
some time to answer some questions. If you have any questions, please do drop it into the chat box, and let's have this conversation together. So Nina says, when you have a small tribe, how would you work your way up to be stronger and heard? That would be the biggest challenge. How would that how would do that to pull through?
I don't know, Nina, what you mean by small tribe. I think you need to have multiple tribes. It's not just one single tribe. I have a set of tribe that are in my workplace. So you need to find your allies at workplace, and maybe that would evolve. Those allies will evolve to become a tribe. If not, there will still be allies that will promote you at work. You need to have a tribe outside of your workplace with people who are aligned with your values, who are or maybe working towards the similar goals that you are working towards, and that would be a separate set of tribe that helps you attain your leadership aspirations. Or if
Mm,
you're into entrepreneurship, you may want to have a tribe of founders and entrepreneurs who are working in the same arena, because you have the same common goal or same common purpose that you all are working towards. So I don't think it's a single tribe. The idea is to create a tribe for whatever aspects of your life you need to propel in, and then that should be an empowering experience and not the and when you say to work your way up to be stronger and heard, I think if you've truly experienced the power of tribe, it gives you the power to speak up. Because many a times, if you're just by yourself and you're only asking yourself, how do I approach it? Should I approach it? Should I not approach it? Particularly, we women hold ourselves back because we are, suffering from imposter syndrome, or we are too unsure. We're not sure whether we have the support or not. And you will most likely either end up holding yourself back, or you may be unsure of how to say it. And that tribe really gives you the confidence to speak up and find your voice. That's been my experience, and I believe that's been the experience of some of my friends who are both a part of my tribe and who advocate for having tribes as a part of your, personal and professional success.
Hmm. Maybe I can follow that up with another question. What if you are somebody who is shy, pretty unsure about yourself? Then how would you go about, getting yourself noticed if you're that kind of person?
Yeah. Um, So now we're going into maybe not just about being a tribe, but also
Hmm.
sort of, how to carry yourself as a shy or an introverted person. Um, I would say if you want to build a tribe as an introverted person, start small. But most of the people in my tribe happen to be introverts. I'm
Hmm.
a very extroverted person. I love the introverts in my life because they give me such deep reflection into things which I may not necessarily be doing. And I've learned to go deeper into my reflections because of the introverts in my life. So I'm eternally grateful to them. So I would say start small. But when you are saying how do you speak up and how do you find the courage to do that, I would say you have to take the first step and maybe also look into starting with spaces where you might be more comfortable to start with. I would also say think about seeking mentorship. If it's
Hmm.
women, I would say approach programs like Lean In or Project Girl for Girls, which are really building safe spaces for women and encouraging women to find their voice within smaller circles. Experiences like that really make a huge difference. And from what I do with Project Girl for Girls and also what we were doing in Lean In Malaysia, one consistent impact that we would hear from women who are part of a program is a boost in their confidence, is their
Hmm.
ability to speak up, their ability to advocate for themselves. So approaching smaller spaces and safe spaces like this for women, I think, is extremely important. um, I don't know how men would do that, Chee-Seng. I'll be very interested how shy men would approach. But I think this is we women are being very smart about working and creating some of these spaces for ourselves, and I'm very curious to ask you, how would you do that as a man?
I think, well, honestly, I think men have a little bit of a disadvantage because women, I guess, by nature are more supportive, whereas men by nature are more competitive. So to to find a space, a safe space, as you say, there are, but the elements of competitiveness do come in.
Mm,
So, but my experience of, well, I'm not sure whether I've built a tribe, but my experience of actually coming out of my shell was on LinkedIn actually, and LinkedIn was my
mm,
safe space. I was very nervous about being judged on LinkedIn actually, but once I took that first step out to really say what was on my mind, and
mm,
I saw that there was response and it was positive response. Nobody was hating me. And I thought,
mm.
okay, then I can take the second step, right? Then I can take the third step, and like you said, it's really very true. The first step out is the most crucial,
Yeah,
right? And
absolutely.
then the courage to take just the next step, just the next step. And if the next step is the wrong one, okay, just backtrack and take another step in another direction, right?
Yeah,
It's just a matter of one step at a time. And
absolutely.
yeah, so I think for me that was what worked. And my experience after about a year and a half, or even less, of being on LinkedIn, it has led to a lot of new experiences that I would never have imagined myself doing just over a year ago.
It's amazing.
And yeah, and that's a real confidence booster, right? It would not
Yeah.
have happened if the first step wasn't taken.
Absolutely. I
Mm,
think that's critical. And I think what you also highlight is this, that this is today there is a digital space available for people to express
yeah,
themselves.
yeah,
Something that maybe, my generation or your generation is only learning to do more confidently now. The younger
yeah,
generation has learned it really from the get-go. So that, I think, also adds a huge sort of another platform for them to express themselves
yeah. That's right.
without sort of the human interaction, if you were a shy person, for example, if
Correct.
you don't have camera shyness, of course.
Yeah, and social media really gives you the ability to scale, right? Back in
Yeah.
our day, we had to really shake hands of individuals and talk to them.
Yeah.
Right now, you can put a post and it resonates like with 50 people or 100 people. So it's
Absolutely.
at scale. It's at scale. Okay, let's come
Absolutely.
back to our original topic: purpose in leadership. Okay, maybe I put it in a scale of 1 to 10. How important is purpose when it comes to leadership in your experience?
Ooh, I think it's extremely important. And I would say 10. And let me say why. Because having purpose driven leadership does not mean that, for example, metrics are not important, or KPIs are not important, or,
Mm,
processes are not important. There is not an either or way of looking at purpose driven leadership, right? I believe purpose driven leadership is extremely important, and more so in today's sort of what we call the VUCA reality, because
mm,
there are so many rapid and complex changes that the leaders today are grappling with. And as you and I were talking before the show, the millennials are a different generation.
mm,
Our leaders of today are working with multi-generational workforce, and it's becoming very, very clear that the what's and the hows are not enough to keep the millennials going.
mm,
People, and not just the millennials. I think if you look at what the pandemic has done to the world, it's extremely important now to have purpose driven work. And I was talking about this with another panel a while ago, and I remember, for preparation of that panel, I was listening to Indra from PepsiCo, the CEO of PepsiCo, and I remember her talking about purpose driven leadership. This is a company that produces soda and sells soda, and
mm,
they're now selling soda on the back of a brand based on a purpose. So we're
mm,
no more living in a world where we have a either or approach to purpose driven leadership. I think it is critical,
mm.
for effective leadership, to keep purpose and people at the center of it, and then everything else is built with that in mind.
So it's interesting that you mentioned a conglomerate or multinational on purpose, uh, which always brings up the question in my mind, right? How do you embed purpose at that scale, right? When you're talking about like tens of thousands of employees all over the world.
That's a very good question. I'm glad you asked that. Um, in the traditional model of leadership, we saw purpose coming from the top to the bottom. And as we were talking before the show, it's something that I caught on what we were talking about, that the leaders define the purpose and everybody gets aligned with it. I think that dynamic is also slowly shifting. And now we're
Mm,
talking about inclusive shared vision. And companies
mm,
are more and more building shared vision together. And this is no more a consultant that is coming in from an outside agency building your purpose for you, and then you, the leader, being the transitioner of that purpose to your people. That's not an effective model anymore.
mm,
What effective leaders are doing is building it with their team. So for that purpose to be truly going down to your people, no matter how big or small your organization is, it has to be a shared and inclusively built purpose. The other thing that is important when it comes to purpose driven leadership is to align your individual purpose and values with the organization, and that's where the leader comes in. I have a very interesting story. When I worked in Malaysia, so what Lean in career program that I was a part of, that I mentioned, did for me was that it did open the door for me to do a consultancy with a global startup. at that time, and I'm not going to go into names. And I got into a consultancy. I did some interesting work for them, and they offered me a job, and they said, "Name your price." And I said, "Thank you, but no thank you," because that organization had no sense of purpose connected from the top to the bottom. All they were
Oh,
doing were acquisition. And the piece
right.
of work that I did for them had a high attrition rate, because as I went in 2 years after their existence for the first time, to conduct a staff training for them, which was at my own accord because I realized the disconnect. I asked them, "Do you know the mission and vision of this company?" They said no. I said, "Do you know the
Mm.
name of the CEO of this company?" They said no.
Wow.
So this huge disconnect can only be closed when you align with people's individual values and missions as well. And I
Mm.
remember it was just a 1 day training where we did a pre and post evaluation of the training, and people had a 95% increase in realizing how they were connected to the company, because
Mm.
the company was built on a global vision, but it's just like, how do you translate it and then connect it with the individual purpose of the team and the individuals within the team?
Mm. And that really sounds a lot like a company having to build its own tribe, right? The shared values that you
Yes,
have to share with your employees. I
yes.
remember doing some work for a company in Malaysia, and they had brought in and the company was a bit coasting, and they had brought in a new CEO, and he wanted to impart a new culture. And I remember the process was quite painful because the people who couldn't adapt, so the attrition
Yeah.
rate was quite high, and they were like, okay, it's okay, right? Because we need the people to be on board. So
Ah,
uh,
interesting. Interesting. I remember this PepsiCo talk that I was talking about, in which Indra says that you've got to realize who are the people who are with you, and learn to let go of the people who are a hindrance in what you know for sure is the right thing to do.
mm,
um, and I think and I think Simon Sinek is a very common name when it comes to, purpose driven work. And I was just listening to his talk a while ago, and I remember in it very clearly, in which he sort of talked about that you don't let people go until you know for sure that they're not coachable. So
mm,
coach them first. If you are
right,
trying to bring change in your company, coach the people first. And if you are sure that they're not coachable, then unfortunately, there are casualties in the process of change. So yeah,
yeah,
this is interesting thing to keep in mind.
yeah. So if you have any questions, do ask Aisha while she still has time here. I think we have another 15 minutes at most. Meanwhile, let's go to our next question. What are some of the most important issues that you see, in terms of purposeful leadership that needs to be addressed today?
Hmm. Hmm. I think couple of things. So this is for which I need to go to my notes. I think the one thing is to have a sense of direction,
Mm,
because this is such an complex, uncertain world that we all live in, that more than ever before, a leader's challenge is to create a sense of direction and a roadmap for and together with its employees. So I think that is very, very important. That's a huge challenge, but increasingly leaders who are able to do that well are able to thrive in this VUCA reality. The other thing is
mm,
to build connectedness across teams, across departments, across individuals, because more than ever before with the COVID reality, we're working in silos, we're working with
mm,
behind our screens all the time, and keeping connected has become more challenging than ever before. And I think this connectedness includes both connecting people as a team, and working through it in today's Zoom reality or digital
mm,
reality, but then also really doing what I was saying earlier, was understanding the individual values and sense of purpose with the larger sense of purpose. I think that's a huge
right.
challenge. That's easier said than done. It's a
Yeah.
huge challenge. It's a very time consuming process. It doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen through one team retreat.
Yeah,
which is often sometimes we think we've done a retreat and we've ticked the box. I
and
can
I
see a
think it
burning
also takes, I think it also takes a lot of strength and courage on the part of the leaders. I remember because I run a very small center, right? A small education center. I've got a staff of like five or four, depending on how many students I have. And it, there are times when you need to have difficult conversations with the staff to keep them in line with what we want to do in the company, right? In the business, uh, and it's really not easy. Right? I mean, for myself, I'm not aggressive. I'm not competitive. I'm not extroverted. I don't speak my mind so easily. And to have this conversation with the staff that is the other staff are looking at them and saying, why is he doing this? Because when he's slacking, I have to pick up the slack.
Mm,
Right? So
absolutely.
it does take a lot of courage, and that's where I think what you say is really true, right? Where are the support for the leaders who feel like this,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah. No, absolutely. And I think that unfortunately, we aren't living in a world where institutions or companies are building these within the industry. I think since you're in Malaysia, the 30% club, for example, is a great
Mm,
place where I see the HR leaders getting together. So maybe
mm,
the industry leaders sort of acknowledging this as a part of their both challenge and responsibility to maybe create these platforms.
mm,
Again, not easier said than done, but doable, right? And creating and finding those platforms where you could bring people together. I think your channel is another great way, where you bring people with a certain mindset, certain approach to leadership. Whether you could involve this into another community, I think is something to ponder over. And I believe that
yeah.
each one of us have the um, could take on the opportunity to create communities where we go, and there's a huge advantage in doing so.
Yeah, so I think it's really important what you say, right? Having that support system in place. Let's look at Sangita. Is the definition of being a leader changing? Must leaders be communicative, charismatic, and strong? Is there a space for leaders who are not? Oh, I'd be interested in this. Not considered A types. How does being led by such leaders vary when one was quotes for them?
uh, how does being led by such leaders work? Okay, it's absolutely changing, and Sangeeta is definitely somebody who can talk so much about this subject, because I know her personally and I know what a strong leader she is, and she's not type A. So, Sang, if this was a clubhouse, I would have pulled you in the conversation right now to make it much more enriching. But it is absolutely changing. This is no more the world where just type A's are respected or sort of leading. The challenge, however, is that
Hmm.
we, the type A's, need to create space for everyone to be included. And I'll come
Hmm.
to the first half of Sangeeta's question, but we need to create this space and create that inclusive environment for people to speak up. And you may not necessarily be able to do that for the people who are your peers, but you can definitely do it for the people who are working for you. Um, I'm a part of the Ecumen Fellowship that has just started in Pakistan. Very, very diverse community. And we had a very interactive, immersive, a 9 hour, 6 days a week experience a couple of weeks ago, in which we are people from all sorts of backgrounds. And we want to build that place together as a very inclusive space for all of us to communicate. I'm a type A, and very easy for me to speak, very easy for me to be the first one to speak and break the silence or raise my hand. And it took so much intentional effort on my part to be quiet and to let the silence linger on so that those who are not type A can speak up. And that was the first time ever in my life, because I'm working on inclusion, that I recognize that part of the deal for type A leaders like us is to build type be, or whatever introverts, extrovert leaders of the future, so that this whole direction of expecting leadership to be a certain model can change. Sangeeta also talked about is the definition of leader changing. It absolutely is. I think no more are we talking about the top down approach of leadership. This purpose driven leadership model, if you study it academically, which is not what I'm suggesting, or it's not something that I've deep dived into, but when you do look into purpose driven leadership, it talks about leaders in every person that you come across, building
Mm.
leaders together. And that's the whole idea. Today is no more a world in which leaders are known by their followers. Today, leaders are known by
Mm.
the leaders that they build. So I
Mm.
think this is definitely, and the last thing is also with COVID 19. I think COVID 19 has busted so many leadership myths, right? It has put empathy, it has put communication, and all of that at the center of leadership. And there's no sort of going back from where we started from. So thanks for the question, Sang. It's everybody's leadership is for everyone. No more type A's or the dominant type.
And yeah, Vimala, you just echoed what I was thinking in my mind, right? Servant leadership that's emerging, and I think the concept of servant leadership is really interesting, where you are not considering yourself as a type A upfront, take charge and command and go forth, but actually serving the needs of those that you follow, right? And I think what you said just now is really interesting, that if you're the type A, to actually pull back and allow people the space to
Yeah.
to develop. And I think that's really amazing. And I certainly resonate with that, because I'm totally not type A. So
I
yeah.
know, Chee-Seng. I want to say something though in response to Vimala. Thank you for bringing servant leadership up. I think we have the tendency of looking at things in an with an either or lens, right?
Mm.
Um, Leadership by purpose, by definition, means to be able to take some charge, right?
Mm.
It doesn't necessarily mean that you are uh, 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 I shouldn't be taking names here. It doesn't mean that you are that type A toxic person who has no ability to feel for someone, but it means that you're able to take charge of something, whether that is something that is within your boundaries, within your surface, your thought process, your. So I think by virtue of leadership, it means that we're able to take charge and do something about something, right?
Mm.
So I'm always baffled when I feel like when that the talks around leadership seem so focused on either or. Being a
Mm.
servant leader does not mean that you're not taking charge. You are actually taking charge to lead from behind and let the other person take charge by mentoring them, encouraging them to take charge. So
Mm.
I just want to sort of flag that we need to rid ourselves of this either or lens and think about this and that servant leadership and purpose driven leadership, or
Yeah.
so all of these philosophies need to merge, and not be just exclusive.
Yeah, and I think we when we get caught up in too being too ideological, then again we go back to the problem of being siloed, right? Okay, you need to be this type of leader, you need to be that. I think in the
Yeah.
uncertain world that we live in now, it's all about agility, right? What works in this situation? Okay, taking charge and being loud works. What works in that
Yeah.
situation? Okay, it's about being humble and communicative and empathetic. You can be the same person, which I think
Absolutely.
is one of the issues today, right? Because we are so used to Western business school type of leadership philosophy, where it's type A, very American style. But in a world that needs such agility, I think we really really need to go back to the basics of leadership. It's not about the management. I mean, all right, not to put a label to it, but it's not about the whichever school of management you come from, right? But
Yeah.
it's really about being as you said, the person of value, and how you express that value into the world, right? Authentically into the world. I think that's really
Yeah.
important.
What's interesting, Chasing, is that many of the leaders that we probably look up to, at least people in your and my generation, are either political leaders, or maybe even if they are corporate leaders, they don't have management degrees. They didn't earn an MBA to become a leader. They truly believed in the why. They believed in why they were doing what they were doing. And whether we are talking about people like the Mandela and Gandhis and or Teslas or Steve Jobs of the world,
Mm,
what made them great leaders was not an MBA degree.
yeah, that's right. So it's really about the person, I feel. So if it's about the person, then it's really not about your character type, it's not about your leadership style, but it's really about you, what you hold on to. And I believe what you say, right, is your purpose. um uh,
It's about connecting with who you are and what you want to do, right?
mm,
So truly sort of understanding who you are, what change you want to see in the world, what impact you want to leave, and then starting your journey authentically from there on as to what you want to be or do in the world, I think is a starting point.
right. Okay, so we are running out of time has gone by so fast, just like that. Okay. Oh, okay, I think we have to skip that. What would be your three big takeaways for us tonight?
Um, so I think my three big takeaways for people who are listening would be lead by example. If you truly want to create a difference, lead by example. Lead with empathy, put people at the center of it all, because that's very critical. We are through a global pandemic right now, and we need to be
Mm,
together in this. And then I would say understand your why. If you truly want to emerge as an authentic, impactful, purpose driven leader, find time to understand your why, and from there, there's no stopping.
all right. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I think this has been a great session. I certainly learned a lot, and I really gained a lot from this. All right. Any final words before we end the show?
No, thank you so much for having me. If I go into words, there would be more advice. But if you want me to give some advice, then I would say for the younger leaders, for the younger ones, aspiring leaders, please invest in your years. Go do all the things that you've always wanted to do. Don't chase the purpose, it'll come to you. And for
Mm.
the older ones, I would say please develop future leaders. We have a generational responsibility to do that.
Oh, amen to that, man. So, all right. So, I would probably want to ask you back for another episode, uh, because I think there's a
Sure.
lot of things we can really continue talking about, right?
Thank you. Be a pleasure.
But for the moment, it's time to say goodbye. Sorry, for the moment, it's time to say goodbye. But let me give you a preview of what is coming next week. We will be talking to Vimala Supaya. And well, this topic might sound a little bit controversial, but I think we have touched a little bit on this as well, Aisha, tonight. Are we failing the millennials, right? What does it take to nurture the next generation of leaders? So I've had a little bit of a conversation with Vimala before this, regarding this topic, and also with a couple of other people. And I think this is something that is really, really important, right? And we had this conversation before we came on air as well, Aisha. So join us next week, and so join us next week as we speak to Vimala about this. Vimala is a very, very experienced coach, award-winning coach, and with the international reach. So don't miss this episode, and make sure you join us on the October 12th at 8:30 p.m. Malaysia time, or wherever you are. Mark your calendars. Or if you don't want to miss this show, join the Leaders Dojo group. If you want to know how to join the group, just give me a message, and I'll send you the link. Right. So thank you very much, Aisha, again, and thank you very much for everyone who joined us tonight. And I will see you on the next Leaders Dojo. Good night.
Good night, everyone. Thank you for joining.